Everyone, hope that you're doing well. Today is Saturday, October 17th. This is the sermon for October 18th for First Baptist Church of Ojai. And for those of you who are not yet joining us, we just moved indoors for our worship service last Sunday. We had a great service, and as others are coming back, we're working hard to make it as comfortable and natural as possible for you in terms of spreading out the seating and masks required and that kind of thing. We are singing right now. We're allowed to do that, but we're keeping masks on while we sing. And please let us know if there's any way that we can serve you as you return, and any way that we can make things as comfortable for you as possible. We'd love to see you again whenever you feel comfortable taking that step. There's lots of announcements that I have today that are kind of specific to gathering, but not all of them. So just briefly, next Sunday, we're going to have some new missionaries visit that we just started supporting within the last year, the Wagners. They're absolutely amazing people, and they're serving a younger couple serving in North Africa. I'm so excited for you to get to meet them. So we'll have a little bit of a shorter sermon so we can have time in the service for them to share a little bit about their ministry, and I know that's going to be encouraging. So just be aware that's happening. Following that, we're into November. So we're going to be doing a short 4-week series in the book of Isaiah called Let God Be God. Then we're into Advent. And then starting in 2021, we'll be in the book of Romans, a long series in January, February, and on into March in the book of Romans. So here we are already planning into 2021. And then I'll just mention Operation Christmas Child. You can still participate in that, even if you are not physically present on Sundays. So you can check out the website and see there's 3 different ways you can participate. We'd love to invite you to be a part of that, even if you're not regathering us. That's been on my heart lately, actually, that as much as we're still physically apart, let's try to maintain unity as much as we can, and we'll try to keep communicating as best we can with you. And please let us know how we can serve you and care for you and minister to you as we're not all yet back together in the sanctuary. But it's been great to be back inside for those of us who have been there. And then also tonight, we're starting the apologetics class, 6:30 on Sunday evening in the sanctuary. We'll put up a Zoom link for those who want to join in that way, although I'll say that the Zoom link won't be the ideal. Really, if you can be there, that'll be better, because we'll have different points where we'll have discussion, where we'll be have a discussion partner. And we'll be, like in the last week, we'll do a little bit of role play with that person in terms of evangelism. So really, if you can be there, that would be the ideal, better than doing it through Zoom. Okay, today we are finishing our series called God is the Hero, in which we've been looking at many different stories in the Bible. We've talked about David and Goliath, Daniel in the lion's den, Jacob wrestling with God in Genesis 32. That was maybe my favorite one. I've never really preached on that or thought about that story that much. Cain and Abel, Samson and Delilah. That was another interesting one for me. The book of Job, Abraham and Isaac, and Jonah. And now we are finishing off. In each of these stories, I hope you have found this enjoyable. I love going through these famous stories of the Bible, but not just because they're interesting stories. The goal each time is to learn about the grace of God. It's to learn something about just the mechanics of the gospel, that we don't need to be our own savior, that God's grace breaks into our lives and changes everything about our lives. We don't have to fix ourselves. We don't have to be our own hero. In the Bible, no one is their own savior. There's no heroes, really. Ultimately, there's minor heroes, but it's Jesus. Jesus is the hero of every portion of the Bible. And Jesus is the hero of even these Old Testament stories, and you even see little glimpses of Jesus in these stories. Well, that's going to be the case again today. We're finishing off in Exodus chapter 14. This is the story of the Israelites passing through the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea. And for anyone who's not familiar with how this story begins and what gets us to this point, you might recall that at the Exodus is the second book of the Bible. At the end of the first book of the Bible, you have the patriarchs, that's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have lived their lives. And so Genesis 1 through 11 is kind of the preamble. This is setting the stage for Abraham. This is God's creation, Noah and the flood, the Tower of Babel, all that happens there in really ancient history. And then you get to Genesis 12, and this is where God's redemptive plan through Abraham and his offspring that would comprise the nation of Israel begins. All throughout the book of Genesis, then you see how God is at work through Abraham, and then his son Isaac, and then his son Jacob, who's also called Israel. Well, Israel has 12 sons. They become the 12 tribes of Israel. And at the end of the book of Genesis, you have them living in Egypt. Well, as you know, eventually they become slaves in Egypt, and their descendants multiply and multiply. They become this huge people. And God appears to the character Moses at the beginning of the book of Exodus through the burning bush and says, "Go to Pharaoh and say, 'Let my people go.'" Moses is joined by Aaron, and they say this to Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardens his heart and won't listen to the Lord. And so God sends the plagues, 10 plagues, to harass the Egyptians. Finally, Pharaoh gives in, lets them go. The Israelites have just left. They've just had their first Passover. And then Pharaoh changes his mind, comes after all the Israelites with his armies. That's where we're at as we get to Exodus 14 and the parting of the Red Sea. The Israelites are trapped between the sea and the Egyptians. I'll pick up at verse 10, Exodus chapter 14. You can read with me or listen with me if you don't have a Bible on you. Exodus 14:10, when Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they will go in after them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of the Lord, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night, without one coming near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove back the sea by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went out into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. This is one of those miracles in the Bible that would have been, that when you read about it, it's exciting and you think, what an awesome thing God did. But to experience it in the moment would also have been frightening. And if you have the ability and it's natural for you to do so, maybe you're together as a family, I would love to invite you all to pause the video and do one of two things. You can decide how you want to do this, but one is do a search on YouTube, since I know you're watching this on YouTube, for type in Prince of Egypt crossing the Red Sea and watch the first 4 minutes of that video clip that comes up. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. It might help you with this. The other thing I want to invite you to think about doing, talk with the people around you about why this would have been scary. Come up with as many reasons as you can come up with. It's one of those questions that when you first think about it, you might not be able to think of anything, but the more you think about why it would be scary to go into the dry ground, I bet you can come up with more than one reason why it would have been terrifying. So if some of you are watching this alone, you don't have to do that. If you're with someone else and it's comfortable to talk about that question with, pause this video and do one or both of those things. Watch the video clip and talk about that question. Why would it have been scary to cross through the Red Sea? And I'll share with you whenever I ask a question like that, so this is assuming you've unpaused it and come back now. I'll share with you 4 or 5 reasons why I thought it would be terrifying, and it took me a while to think of some of these, but the more I used my imagination, and watching that clip from the Prince of Egypt helped me, the more I could think about it. The first is the most obvious. The water could collapse. If it's a wall on your right hand and on your left, at any moment when you're walking, it's kind of like walking out on an old rickety bridge, and you're not sure if at halfway through it's going to collapse underneath you. At any moment, it'd be scary thinking about those waters falling back on you. That's the obvious one. But then I kept thinking, and I thought, what if, the Egyptians are faster than the Israelites? It's their chariots and horsemen here. What if the pillar of cloud goes away and they chase us? Then we've got nowhere to go. That could be an even worse situation. But then I started thinking about all the other little details that this would feel like as you're walking through there. So according to verse 20, all of this happened at night, probably, because it says the Egyptians couldn't get near the Israelites all night. So then I'm imagining, can you imagine how dark it would be? The natural light is going to be pretty minimal coming through the tiny top between the divided waters, And I don't know, it's hard to imagine exactly how high the walls were, how much of this was, excuse me, how much of this was, completely steep or I don't know the details and proportions, but anyway you look at it, it would have been dark. And so you would have been like, I can well imagine some of the Israelites bumping into the wall of water, because you can't see where you're going. I mean, I'm sure they had torches or something, but I don't know the details, but I know it would have been dark. It would have been scary. Also, the bottom of the sea is not a pleasant place to walk. Have you ever been walking in the ocean and you step on something and you're not sure what it is? That's not a comfortable feeling. I can only imagine the bones and weird things that they could have stepped on as they're walking through the Red Sea. And just the foreignness of that environment. The Red Sea is one of the most salty bodies of water in the world. It's a long way to get from one side to the other. What if you get tired? What if you run out of water along the way? What if you don't make it all the way? So the Red Sea is salt water. It's a seawater inlet from the Indian Ocean that goes in between Africa and Asia. So from the Indian Ocean funnels in, and it kind of has a forked ending like that. And because they get lots of evaporation and not much precipitation, it's very salty. So if you know the average salt percentage of oceans is about 35%. The Salton Sea, if you know the Salton Sea here in Southern California, further inland, further south from us, is about 44%. It's very salty to the point where fish can't really swim there. Well, the Red Sea is about between those two. It's about 40%. So you just imagine what it would have smelt like, and just the uncomfortable feeling of pressing into this dark, uncertain, unstable feeling. It really would have felt, I think, like stepping out onto a bridge and you're not sure if it's going to hold you. And we're going to use that picture, stepping into that dark space, as an image for what it means to walk by faith and step by faith into God's pathway, the way that God makes for you and me. And we're going to talk about how when we step forward by faith, following God's leading, God makes a way for us. And the experience of these people walking through the Red Sea is a lot of what faith feels like. Moment by moment, stepping forward, trusting that these walls of water are not going to crash on me. And I love that imagery because I know, though not as much as many of you know, because many of you are older than me and have been walking with the Lord for many more years than I have, the vulnerable feeling of walking through life by faith, when you have to make a decision, for example. Some of you, and I've experienced this, God calls you to move and relocate from point A to point B. You're changing jobs, you're changing areas, and that is an uncertain feeling. You're not sure how are our kids going to do at the new school, how will finances make it, will our house sell? There's lots of uncertainty whenever you move like that. Moving is one of the most stressful things. When God calls you to move, it's that feeling of stepping forward by faith, and you're not sure. It's like you have to moment by moment be trusting in the Lord. I actually think the same thing can apply when God calls you to stay put and not relocate, and you're not sure how that's going to work out. So I don't want to glorify moving as though that's always the more vulnerable choice, sometimes not moving. But either way, however God leads you, that can be a vulnerable feeling of stepping forward, and just that sense of like, you know how that feels. It's like stepping out onto a rickety bridge and you're saying, okay, Lord, are you really going to provide? Theoretically, I trust you, but do I really trust you? Or when you're looking to communicate the gospel with those around you, you're looking to start a ministry that God's calling you to start. You're seeking to be faithful with your tithing and your service at church. So much of the Christian life boils down to this reality of walking by faith, looking to the Lord moment by moment. So let's learn two things from this story about what it means to walk by faith. Trusting that God will make a way, and obeying when God does make a way. As I studied this passage this week, those are two things I think you can see the Israelites needing to do, and it's really interesting and helpful, I think, to see both of them. Trusting that God will make a way first. And that's where the Israelites would have been for this passage, and what really struck me the most. Because you remember in verse 10, when they see the Egyptians, they're terrified, very understandably. They're trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. If you've ever heard the expression caught between a rock and a hard place, that expression communicates when someone is in a position where they have no good choice. Either way they go, they're stuck. And that's exactly what the Israelites would have felt here. And here's the thing that was so interesting to think about this week as I studied this passage, and I submit to you right now, is how different this is from Jonah. Jonah got into a really bad situation, being swallowed by the whale, because he disobeyed the Lord. But the Israelites are here in this position precisely because they have obeyed the Lord. In fact, in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 14, God specifically commanded Moses to camp the Israelites in this region, right next to the sea. And that's why you have all this refrain, as you get so much throughout these early chapters of Exodus, of the Israelites basically complaining and saying, it would have been better just to stay in Egypt. I would have rather been a slave than what we're going through right now. Verse 11, is it because there's no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What if you were Moses and you heard those words? Basically, they're saying, God, why did you bring me to a dead end? I obeyed you, I did what you said to do, and it led to a dead end. And it's not the first time they felt that way. All along, as God's providing for them, they hit seeming obstacles, seeming dead ends. But of course, here as elsewhere, God has a plan. In verses 3 to 4 of this chapter, and again in verses 17 and 18, God says, I've put you here specifically so that I will get glory by defeating the Egyptians. So the situation in which it looked like the Israelites were trapped and hit a dead end was God's plan. God brought them to that very place to show his salvation. Have you ever been at a moment in your life where you're following the Lord as best you can? You're not being like Jonah. You're not running away from his will. You're seeking to follow him as best you can, and you hit a dead end. And you think, Lord, it's kind of like the Israelites in verse 11 here. Why did I even do this if it's going to end up like this? Was it even worth it? In those moments, we need to remember God has a plan and God is doing something, and we need to trust that God will make a way. I thought it was so interesting as I looked up the song, God Will Make a Way. I'll read the lyrics in a moment to learn about the circumstances of that song in preparation for this sermon. It's written by Don Moen, who got a call in the middle of the night from his mother-in-law. And there was a car accident. His sister-in-law and her husband and their 4 little kids were in an automobile accident, and they were all seriously injured. And it was uncertain who is going to make it and will they survive. And they just went through this season of grieving and crying out to God and feeling helpless, and they were trying to encourage their sister-in-law and her husband. And he remembers, so he talked about this song, and he said, I was asking the Lord to help me express hope to these family members, but I didn't know what to say. How do I express hope? And in that context, he wrote down these lyrics that has given encouragement to so many. The lyrics go like this: God will make a way when there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely by his side. With love and strength for each new day, he will make a way. And I love the fact that the circumstances of that song were one of uncertainty, expressing, trusting by faith. God is going to make a way. He's going to provide for us here somehow, just like the Israelites. God's calling them in this passage through Moses' words to say, don't be afraid. Trust that God will make a way. And when we hit those moments in our lives, as we inevitably will, where it feels like following God has become a dead end, we need to trust in the Lord that he will make a way. I love what Moses says in verse 13, and just the profound relevance of these words to those moments in life when he says, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you only have to be silent. It's like he's saying, don't be afraid. Stand firm. Just be quiet and watch. The Lord is going to make a way. He's going to fight for you. It's like he's saying, hey, you guys don't need to get out of this mess. You didn't get yourselves into this mess. You're here because you're following God. You don't need to get out of this mess. Just be quiet and watch. God is going to do something. God is going to make a way. And there are so many moments in life where I feel that's applicable, where you just have to, don't panic, like Moses says, fear not, stand firm. You only need to be quiet. Don't panic. Step back and just watch the Lord work. Say, Lord, I'm going to trust that somehow or another you're going to get me out of this situation. You're going to make a way forward. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean the way forward is going to be one of prosperity, but it means God's not going to abandon you. I remember a seminary professor saying, he's actually not, he was just a pastor, but he was teaching this really brief 1-hour class per week on placement. And so many guys were worried, where am I going to be placed? Where am I going to find a job? Because in seminary, that final semester, you're all applying for jobs, and it's the kind of thing where, unlike some other professions, it is more diverse geographically. You can end up anywhere in the world, really, but especially around the United States. And I remember him saying, he'd always say to us, God didn't bring you this far just to let you fall off the end of the end of the earth, or just to let you fall off the face of the earth, to just fall into the void. And sometimes I'd get kind of frustrated by that, because I'd say, yeah, but I know I'm not going to fall off the face of the earth, but we were in a season of trying to decide where we're going to go, and it was like, it's not easy, and it's not always easy. The fact that God makes a way doesn't make things easy, but the point is that God will provide. He will direct. He will show us what to do, and there is this genuine dynamic of walking by faith where we just have to cry out to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm going to trust that you are going to make a way. Sometimes we get to trials in life and we have to, it's encouraging to consider this. Maybe God brought us to just that trial precisely because he wants to get glory by showing us what he only can do. And when you hit those moments in your life where things in your life are unresolved, you're following Christ, something happens and it's unresolved, and you're saying, Lord, what about this? Or your efforts at following God's will just have led to a dead end, and you're saying, Lord, what do I do? In those moments, sometimes all we can do is just fall on our face before God and just commit ourselves to him. Say, Lord, I can't get myself out of this mess, You have to. I'm going to watch. I'm going to trust. I need you to make a way for me, whether that be financial provision, whether that be strength to get through the day, to keep going, whether that be to take that step of obedience that we need to take. But I love Moses' words. Don't be afraid. Watch what God will do. God will make a way. And we can trust in that. We can take that to the bank. But that's only half of it here. It's not enough to simply trust that God will make a way. The real scary part, as we talked about, and as maybe you watched in the clip of Prince of Egypt, is when that door opens, when God makes a way, we have to obey. We have to walk into that way. And what's so interesting about this story is that God actually commands the Israelites to move forward before the sea parts. Follow the order of events with me as I just read in verse 15. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward." And then he says, lift up your staff, stretch out your stand. And then he explains that he's going to get glory over the Israelites. And then the pillar of cloud comes and blocks the Egyptians, verses 19 and 20. And then Moses stretches out his hand and the waters part and the people walk forward into them. And it looks like God is kind of telling them, move forward before they actually see the results. And while the pillar of cloud is still going in front of the Egyptians, and I don't know exactly the sequence of events here, but certainly with Moses at least, can you imagine the vulnerable feeling of walking by faith for Moses? He's got to step out and stretch out his staff, and how dumb would he look to do that if nothing happens? But he's stepping forward by faith. I bet this happened in the video clip you might have seen. He got his feet wet. At least moist, you know? He's stepping out into that uncomfortable place where there's water, holding out his staff, walking in obedience to God, and the people then have to move forward as things aren't totally certain. What if the waters fall back on us? What if the Egyptians chase us? They have to make a decision. You know, I just thought, when you're faced with the prospect of standing still or stepping into the dark, smelly bottom of the salty sea, it would have been so much more comfortable just to stand there. Researching about group dynamics and the way people, so often we don't change until the status quo is more uncomfortable than where we've got to get to. It would have been so easy to just say, you know, Moses, I think that pillar of cloud is going to stay there a little longer. I don't think we need to go. Harry Truman, the president, has a famous quote. He said, "I wonder where the Israelites would be if Moses had taken a pole before they crossed the Red Sea." I bet there's a lot of Israelites who would have said, let's just bank on the pillar of cloud a little longer. It would have been more comfortable. But God was saying, step forward in faith. Trust me. It's going to be okay. There's something wonderful for you on the other side of this. The promised land is ahead. I've got blessing and joy ahead for you. But you have to step forward by faith and walk in that way that I've opened up for you. Where is God saying to us today? Where is God saying to you today? Step forward by faith. Walk in the way that I am creating for you. I remember when I'm from the Midwest. There's been several times in my life when I've been driving in bad weather, sometimes by rain, sometimes by fog, and sometimes by snow. And often you just stop completely if it's bad sight. But there's been one time or two when I remember, especially in a short distance, you've got to go and your visibility is very poor, but you just you can't stay where you are. You have to get to the side of the road, or you have to get out of harm's way or something like that. And even with your lights on and the windshield wipers going at full speed, your visibility is very poor. And you're going mainly by just the dim lights out in front of you. Have you ever been in a snowstorm like that, or rain or something, fog, where you can barely see and you're driving? That is such an uncomfortable feeling, isn't it? Even if you're certain by memory that there's nothing in front of you, it's to actually move your car forward when your visibility is bad is such an uncomfortable feeling. And that is such the feeling of faith. I'm sure the Israelites felt that uncomfortable feeling of stepping forward. Imagine just as you get to the point where the wall of water just gets above your head and you can't see out over the sea anymore, and you're just going down into that's another thing that'd be scary, is you're going down into the sea. It would have been scary, but here's the thing. The promised land was ahead, and the Egyptians were behind. You've got to go forward. There's blessing and joy. God's best is ahead, stepping forward by faith. And I want to use this as an image of what it means for us, because we all are on a pilgrimage in this life following Jesus. We're not just here to just hang out. We are on a journey to know God and love God more each year, to obey Him, to advance His kingdom in our lives, to say, your will be done in my life, your kingdom come in my life. We're on a journey like Pilgrim in the book Pilgrim's Progress to the Celestial City, to heaven. There are times in our lives following Jesus when the only thing to do is step forward by faith, even when it's scary, even when it's that vulnerable feeling like driving in a snowstorm, but to move forward by faith. And there's such blessing in that. Sometimes as you do that, you look back and you see how richly God has blessed you. Some of you maybe have experienced that when you do a quiet time in the morning, or you do a devotional time in some way, and you don't feel like you're getting anything out of it, and 2 days goes by, a week goes by, and you're not feeling any difference from it, but you're stepping forward by faith and doing it because you know that God calls you to do that. And then you find yourself suddenly one day in a situation, whether you're talking to someone or you're in a situation personally, and all of a sudden this verse just pops into your mind. And it comes straight out of the one of your quiet times. And you think, I had no idea that I would remember that. And it just came to me. And it's that feeling of when we step forward by faith and we walk in obedience to the way God opens for us, we cannot predict the blessing that will be in that, the good that will be in that. The Israelites, I'm sure, had no idea all the blessing that was ahead of for them and for their descendants in the promised land, all that God would do. Think about the temple, Solomon, all the amazing things ahead in the land of Israel. Never would have gotten there without this. You got to get through the Red Sea to get there. And for us as well, when we step forward by faith into the way that God opens for us as we seek to follow Him, we can't predict all that will result from that, all the blessing, all the joy. Where is God calling you to step forward in your life? Sometimes in our marriages, when we step forward in faith, saying, I'm going to do marriage the way God designed. I'm not going to give my love to anyone else. I am all in for my spouse year after year, though the natural drift of a marriage isn't to keep the kindle and the romance kindled and so forth. I'm going to cultivate that love. I'm going to spoil my spouse. I'm going to buy her flowers. I'm going to buy him a Home Depot gift card. I don't know, whatever he wants, I'm going to date my spouse. I'm going to love my spouse. I'm going to just pour my heart into that person. I'm going to walk in God's way in my marriage. We have no idea how the blessing that will be in that, the way the marriage, like a wine, ripens and gets better with year after year after year. And your relationships with other Christians, when you just simple steps. I'm gonna join that small group, even though I'm kind of intimidated by it, or I'm gonna step in and meet this need at church. I'm gonna get off the bench, and I'm gonna step forward into new territory, and step forward by faith and obey what God is calling me to do and serve. I don't know how it's gonna go. I might regret it. The floor might fall out from underneath me. I might hit a dead end, but I'm gonna step into God's best for me. We have no idea the joy and the blessing that will be in that for us. Kids, little kids, when you obey mom and dad, when you honor them, or teenagers, college students, when you honor your parents, the way you walk through life, you have no idea the blessing that will be in that. That's the only one of the 10 Commandments that promises a blessing. Well, friends, we're talking about walking by faith. And for me, it's been helpful to see both aspects of it in this passage. On the one hand, we've got to say that we've got to trust that God will make a way. That's essential, but that's not enough. We've also got to take the step forward. We've got to walk in obedience. Where is God calling you to step forward by faith? He will make a way. He will take care of you every step of the way. You will know His loving provision in the depths of your soul. It won't be easy. But as you step out in faith, you will find joy and blessing on the other side. I'll leave you with this encouraging story. There's a missionary. Her name was Gladys. She served in China over 50 years ago. Amazing woman. It took her so much just to get there because she was initially declined by the board approving her for various reasons. But she got there. She was serving, and the Japanese were invading her territory, and it was not going to be good. She had to escape. But she couldn't just escape by herself. She and one other assistant had over 100 children with them. Now, I think I get overwhelmed because I got 4. But you can imagine, I mean, that's tough. So they make an incredible journey over the mountains, harrowing, difficult. They finally make it, but they are stuck at a river, and they have to get across this river in order to make it to the other side. And they're not allowed. It's illegal to cross the river. They're not allowed to go there. And she has fallen sick. She's extremely discouraged. She's near despair. And she's just thinking, we're not going to make it. And it's the same feeling of the Israelites in this chapter. Why did we do all this just to die? Same feeling that we feel when we hit a dead end following Jesus. Why did I do all this just to get here? One of the girls, a 13-year-old girl, says to her, remember the story of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. And her response is, yeah, but I'm not Moses. And the girl says, I know you're not Moses, but God is still God. And that helps her, and they began to pray. God make a way. Soon after they pray, one of the Chinese officials goes against his orders in allowing them to use several boats to cross over the river, and they made it to safety. God made a way. And I love the fact that she was discouraged before that happened, because it helps me when I get discouraged. Just in the same way that when I listened to my dad and granddad, times in their lives when they got discouraged, and I realized, oh, even men of God get discouraged. And the fact is this, yeah, we're not Moses, but God is still God. And when we step forward in obedience, seeking to follow him, he will make a way. Let me pray for you. Father, for each of my friends who watches this video, and for anyone else outside of our church family who may watch it in the years and months to come, would you speak to them personally and encourage them to trust in you? We have every reason to trust in you because of what you've done through Jesus, who lived the life we should have lived, who died the death we should have died. It's the ultimate expression of you making a way for us. You made a way for us to heaven. If you made a way for us to have our sins forgiven, you'll make a way for us in each step of life along the way. Encourage each person who watches this video to step forward by faith and take the next step forward in their walk with you. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.